Hello students, each time and every time that I connect with you is always a happy time. So without much delay, shall we proceed with the continuation of the topic on guidance and counseling. If you remember, the last class we had stopped with a very brief description on how do we differentiate between guidance and counseling. From a layman's point of view, very often we tend to use these terms as synonyms. But as a student of an academic discipline, we need to understand how different these two terms or concepts are. So for a better understanding, I have here a tabular representation, and always, even from the exam point of view, it would be better if you can give a tabular representation with basis of difference as the first column and then followed by guidance and counseling. So once we start differentiating any concept, we need to understand what is a basic difference in the nature of guidance and counseling. So starting off with nature, we have already seen that guidance is an advice or a support or an information that is given by a superior or by a peer or by any capable member of the society, and so as to overcome the day-to-day problems that one may encounter. Similarly, when you look at the nature of counseling, that too is no different. It is again an advice or a support or a help. But the basic difference is that counseling is always a support provided by a professional trained in that particular area. So that is the basic difference in nature. Again, when you look at the nature of guidance, we find that it is always preventive in nature. When an individual encounters a problem situation, before the problem affecting them, they seek the help of a guidance worker. So it is more preventive in nature, whereas when you look at counseling, it is more of curative in nature. Why curative? Because when the counselee faces a problem, undergoes a problem, he or she seeks the help of a counselor in order to overcome that problem. So it is more curative, and then again counseling ends up being preventive. Starts with a curative approach and then it ends up being preventive. Why preventive? Because counseling, a successful counseling, always sees to it that the problem never recurs again for the individual. So that is again another area based on nature. How do we differentiate? Again, when you look at guidance, it provides ready-made solutions for the problems that an individual faces. Whereas in case of counseling, we find that it is always an in-depth solution. It alters or changes the perspective of the counselee, the outlook of the counselee. So these are some of the basic differences on the basis of nature. How do we differentiate guidance and counseling? Then, when you come to the definition, we have already seen in the previous classes the most often quoted definition. When you differentiate any most often quoted definition, preferably for guidance, the definition by Jones would be a better option, and for counseling, the most famous proponent or the first name that comes to our lips is that of Carl Rogers, who in fact coined the term counseling, and he was the proponent of non-directive counseling. So Carl Rogers' definition for counseling and Jones' definition for guidance would be an ideal differentiation on the basis of definition. Then moving on to the types or areas of guidance and counseling, basically we have three types of guidance, starting with the personal guidance followed by educational and vocational guidance. We have already seen that. And counseling, basically we classify them as directive counseling, non-directive and eclectic counseling. Then moving on to the exponents. The basic or the most important exponent of guidance is Frank Parsons. Frank Parson. P-A-R-S-O-N-S. In fact, he is credited as the father of guidance, especially vocational guidance. And looking at counseling, the most sought after names is that of the psychologist of the humanistic school of psychology, namely Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow, both of whom are familiar terms or names for you. Then coming on to tools and techniques. As far as guidance is concerned, the basic tools or techniques starts with observation or an interview or a case study or anecdotal or cumulative records, questionnaires and so on. But as far as counseling is concerned, the very, very important, keep in mind, the first is relationship is a very important technique that we use in counseling. Relationship between the counselor and the counselee plays a very prominent role. Then talking therapy. Talking therapy. Heard about talking therapy? This again, the rapport between the counselor and counselee, where the counselor makes the counselee open up with their problems. So that is what we call as the talking therapy. Then again, focusing. Very often when the counselee brings out their problem, they have a tendency to get deviated. So making them focused on their problem and making them arrive at a solution on their own. Focusing, that is yet another technique that we use in what we call as counseling. Then very important, changing state. Changing state. See, when a counselee narrates their problem, they are usually more focused on the past events that might have led to the problem. They are more focused on the anxieties caused by what is going to happen to them in future. So the role of the counselor is to change their mental state and bring them to the present. So that is about the tools and techniques in guidance and counseling. Then last basis of difference, the follow-up. Follow-up may or may not be an essential part of guidance. Guidance need not always end up with follow-up, whereas in case of counseling, follow-up is a very essential part, because successive counseling becomes effective only when there is a follow-up. So that is how we differentiate between guidance and counseling, on the basis of these important facts. Now, when we differentiate these two terms, you should never have the idea that these go in two opposite directions or they are entirely different. In fact, they have to go hand in hand. For bringing out the fullest development of a student personality, guidance and counseling as and when required has to be provided to the student. So there arises the need for what we call as a guidance cell or a guidance bureau as a part of every school system. In fact, the center and the state governments have insisted that a guidance cell or a guidance bureau has to be compulsorily mandatory part of every school system. What exactly is a guidance cell or a bureau? It is a platform which provides a cluster of activities that brings about a solution to the personal, the educational, vocational or social problems that a student may encounter in different phases of their development. So that is what we call as a guidance cell or a guidance bureau. As far as the formation of this guidance cell and bureau is concerned, first of all what we need is a guidance committee. A guidance committee, and the members of this committee, usually we have the principal of the school as the chairman or the chairperson of this guidance committee, followed by a well-trained counselor who is technically and professionally qualified in all respects as the convener of this guidance cell or guidance bureau, followed by representatives from the teaching community, representatives from student community as well as from parents. So all these members together form up what we call as a guidance committee. And once this committee is formed, their task is to provide all kind of support, all kind of advice or provide timely counseling services according to the needs of the students, and that is the function performed by the guidance committee. So once the guidance committee is formulated, the next step is to set apart a certain amount as the financial outlay for that particular academic year to meet the expenses of the guidance cell. So first we form a guidance committee. You have already seen who are the members of the guidance committee, and once the committee is formulated, the next step is financial outlay or the amount of money that is set apart for the activities of one particular academic year. Once these preliminary steps are undertaken, the next stage is planning out the resources required for a guidance cell or a bureau. What are the basic resources? The first and foremost resource is that a room or a space should be set apart as the guidance cell or for the guidance bureau, which should preferably be a room away from the usual hustle and bustle or the disturbances or the functioning of the usual school system. So once such a space is set up, a conducive ambience should be set up. A comfortable ambience should be set up. And then the room should be well furnished, comfortably furnished with table, chairs, racks, display boards to display the posters, the charts and so on. So these form the basic resources of what we call a guidance cell or a bureau. And not only that, the psychological tools for testing the aptitude, for testing the personality, or for testing their career options, their potential for or aptitude for career options, such kind of psychological tools and tests should also be a part of the resources of a guidance cell. And most important part or the most important resource of the guidance cell or bureau, without any doubt, is the presence of a well-trained counselor. So we have decided upon who should form the committee members of a guidance cell. We have seen what is a guidance cell and what are the resources needed for a guidance cell. So once such a guidance cell is formulated, the basic objectives before a guidance cell should be well set apart. What are the basic aims or objectives with which a guidance cell functions? The first and foremost objective will always be self-awareness, making the students self-aware. The first and foremost objective, making them self-aware. And once they are made self-aware or their identity is made aware to themselves, they would turn out to be mature, productive citizens. That again is another objective. Make them mature, productive citizens. Then their problems, adjustment problems. Another objective is adjustment problems. Problems related to adjustment that students may face. That is again rectified by the guidance cell or guidance committee. Then again, psychosocial issues that the students faces. Very often they may not reveal it to anyone. So in the hands of an expert counselor, students can be made to reveal their psychosocial problems. Then providing them with updated information on various changes happening in the society. That is again a very important objective of every guidance cell or every guidance bureau. And moreover, remember, today's children are functioning in a highly competitive, stress-filled atmosphere. And in such an atmosphere, if they have to survive, then essential survival skills is again an objective of every guidance cell or bureau. So these are the basic aims or objectives with which a guidance cell or a guidance bureau functions. So is that very clear? A very important part of every school is the guidance cell. Now, let us see, we have been talking about the normal school system. But now, education is facing a revolution where we have made a switch over from a normal school system to an inclusive classroom. Not only a switch, we are very much in the process of shifting our classrooms to an inclusive classroom atmosphere. And you may be already familiar with this concept of inclusive classroom. See, in an inclusive classroom, we have a group of children along with the normal students. It is not right to demarcate as normal students and another category of students. But still then, for understanding, students who are differently gifted, differently abled also are included in the mainstream classroom, in an inclusive classroom. Children usually differ in their mental outlook, in their skill sets, in their attitude, in their aptitude. Along with these differences you find in a normal classroom. So along with these differences in an inclusive classroom, we also include children who are differently gifted. And always keep in mind, inclusion is not at all tolerance. Inclusion is not tolerance. Instead, it is unquestionable acceptance. You are unquestionably accepting whoever it is. So with this motto, this should be our vision. Intolerance is we are not tolerating inclusion. Inclusion is not tolerance, but it is unquestionable acceptance. So with this point of view, let us see what is the role of guidance and counseling in such an inclusive classroom. So what we have just seen is what is a guidance cell or bureau and what are the basic objectives with which a guidance cell or bureau functions. And this guidance cell or a guidance bureau has got added importance. In fact, guidance and counseling becomes an integral part. A pivotal role is played by guidance and counseling in an inclusive classroom. And the basic aim with which guidance and counseling functions in an inclusive classroom is that sympathy is prohibited and empathy is welcomed. Always a guidance cell functioning in an inclusive school atmosphere should keep in mind, underlined, sympathy is prohibited, empathy is welcomed. That should be the underlining motto of guidance and counseling functioning in an inclusive school setup. So here again, in an inclusive school setup, let us see what exactly are the objectives or role played by a guidance cell or a guidance bureau. So there you find again self-identity. Self-identity. Very often children who are differently gifted, they tend to consider themselves as separate from the mainstream society. So here arises the importance or significance of a guidance cell or a guidance bureau. They have to create a sense of self-identity in such children who are differently gifted. Make them aware of themselves as separate individuals, their self-identity. That is again an important objective of guidance and counseling in an inclusive classroom. Self-identity. Then again, awareness programs. As in the case of usual guidance and counseling program, it is an important objective, but here in an inclusive setup, awareness becomes a matter of added importance. Children should be made aware. At times, they themselves might not be aware of their potential, their skill sets. So guidance and counseling should go hand in hand to make them aware of their potential. Then yet another, a positive image. A positive image. Usually such children tend to develop a world of depression around them. It may not have any real, in real settings, it may not have any foundation at all. It is a self-created world of depression. So for such children, a positive image, self-image has to be created, and that can be created in the hands of an effective guidance worker or an experienced counselor. So positive self-image. And then the list is ongoing, and one more is that all programs and activities should be platforms to bring about the potential of these children, where diversity is celebrated, where their diversity is celebrated. So all kind of activities that are carried out as part of a guidance cell, all these activities should be centered around bringing out the potential of these children, and where diversity becomes a matter of celebration. So this is the additional importance or the added role of guidance and counseling in an inclusive school setup that we are at present aiming at. Okay, so today we have seen how do we differentiate between the concepts of guidance and counseling. We have seen on what are the bases, starting with nature, ending with follow-up. How do we differentiate between guidance and counseling, followed by the formation of a guidance cell or a guidance bureau in every school. And we have also seen what are the preliminary steps needed for forming a guidance cell, starting with a guidance committee, the resources needed, the role played by the counselor in a guidance cell. We have also seen what are the objectives with which a guidance cell functions. Then moving on to the role of guidance and counseling in an inclusive setup. In an inclusive classroom, we have seen it has got added importance, and the motto of guidance and counseling in an inclusive classroom is sympathy is prohibited and empathy is welcomed. In general, the guidance cell has got innumerable activities, many of which you can find an answer to the activities of a guidance cell now itself. Preparing the students for competitive examinations, keeping them aware of job opportunities, providing aptitude tests to assess their potential for different educational courses, for different jobs, planning industrial visits, taking them for industrial or factory visits, career talk and career conference, organizing a career talk or career conference so as to make them familiarize with the changing professional setup of the society. Then career exhibitions can be conducted to make the students more aware. Then in the small group, counseling can be conducted to promote the listening skills, social skills, skills of empathy among the students. All these are, to list a few, these are some of the activities that are carried out by a guidance cell. So by now, I think you might have understood what a pivotal role a guidance cell or a guidance bureau performs in every school setup. Okay, so in the present times, where we are living in an age and time where unprecedented agony in the form of the COVID-19 pandemic we are facing day in and day out, never neglect, underestimate the role of guidance and counseling program. So that's all for today, friends. Have a nice day and stay safe. Thank you.